It's always very humbling to be after Rabbi Breitowitz. Pretty tough act to follow, and I have the distinction of doing this 3 times every week in the center program of speaking after him, so I'm continuously being humbled here. I'd like to start with an interesting idea, at least start with something. The idea of why we're having this seminar in the 3 weeks. What's the connection between a Kiruv seminar during this time? We're mourning over the Beis HaMikdash, and I thought of a few reasons, but I thought at least one to get started as to why this is such a perfect thing to be doing during the 3 weeks. The Gemara says in Yuma, Daf Tes, that the second Beis HaMikdash was destroyed because of Sinas Chinam. That we lost the Beis HaMikdash, and Ad Hayom, we still don't have a Beis HaMikdash because of hatred among Jews. We were busy doing mitzvahs, we were learning Torah, we were doing mitzvahs. We're osek in chesed, that's what Gemara says. People were doing chesed, but there was hatred. They had hatred among themselves. As the Gemara relates over there in Gittin, the story of Kamsa bar Kamsa, there was hatred among the Jews, and this caused the destruction, and because of the hatred is still around, we don't have a Beis HaMikdash ad hayom. And what's the counter, the remedy for this hatred is love, as the Rabbi was speaking about. Love is the antidote for all this hatred. So I was reflecting on the Jewish scene today. I think it's something we all have to be aware of. If we look at the English-speaking world, and we're part of that English-speaking world, we're members of that community, I would say it's a generous estimate to say 85%, 15% of us keep mitzvot. I would say that's a generous estimate of the English-speaking world, which means 85% of Jews are not there. They're not there. They don't, on many levels, don't know what Shabbos is. They don't know what davening is. They don't know what tefillin are. They don't know even what Yom Kippur. Many Jews don't even know what Yom Kippur is. 85%. And so if we really love our fellow Jew, we should want to help somehow. Not all of us are going to be full-time in Kiruv. That's only certain people that have dedicated their lives to this, and we'll talk to those people as to some tricks maybe along the way, tips along the way. But all of us can do something to help our fellow Jew. All of us have a role that we can possibly play. There are those who are going to be full-time. They're going to go out there and try to bring Jews back. There are those who are going to be more in a part-time capacity. As the Rav mentioned, you go to work, and you're at work with a secular guy or many secular people there, and you can have an influence on them. There's a Kiruv organization in your town, and they ask you to host people for Shabbos, to have people for Shabbos meals. And on the bottom line, even financially supporting Kiruv. 85% drowning. Shouldn't we reach out? Shouldn't we want to help them, drag them out of the water? That's the situation today. You know, most of the year, we spend our lives looking at what's going well. And that's how we're supposed to look at what's going well, how we're growing, how we're developing, the beauty of Yiddishkeit, the beauty of Torah. These 3 weeks, we're supposed to start thinking about what's missing. We're mourning. We're mourning over the fact that Klal Yisrael is not where it could be. It's not where it should be. And so this is a time of year, if we thought about this all year long, we'd probably walk around depressed. We'd walk around broken. If we thought about the fact that 85% of the people are not on board and that they don't even know what Yiddishkeit's about, we'd be broken from it. These 3 weeks, we're supposed to be thinking about it. And so maybe it's a very good time that we should strengthen ourselves in the idea of Kiruv. My whole life has pretty much been in Kiruv. I've been 40 years in the game. Done a lot of things in the field. We started a branch of Ohr Somayach in South Africa. Rabbi Shane, Rabbi Moss, and myself, way back, which has been a big success. I was in Chile, of all places, for 3 years, and the last 26 years here in Ohr Somayach. So I have a bit of experience in this idea of reaching out, and I'd like to share some ideas, what I've experienced over the years, some stories of Kiruv, and maybe this can help us be a little better at this and be a little more effective in reaching out and trying to reach other Jews. My first observation is as follows. and I think this is 100% true, and the Rav touched on this a bit in his talk. We, all of us sitting here, are not makarev anyone. We're not makarev. I love people when they say, I made him frum. I made that guy frum. He's my guy. Right? I was makarev him. I brought him into Yiddishkeit. Right? We are not makarev anybody. I think there are three players that are makarev a person. One is the man himself. The man himself opens himself up, and he's willing to hear. He's willing to accept. He's willing to hear from another person. And there are people that are not open. There are people that are closed. They don't want to hear anything. So the main player over here is the guy himself. And if a guy's not open, no matter how great you speak and no matter how many beautiful ideas you bring across, it's not going to change this guy. He's the main player. The second player is Hashem. In His mercy, you think about it. The fact that people growing up, totally secular, no background, suddenly become observant, or not suddenly, as the Rav said, gradually become observant, is a miracle. It's an absolute miracle. And if Hashem wasn't helping these people along and helping them to become frum, they would never make it. But the last thing, and I think the most critical thing, and this is something that I think as you're reaching out to somebody is the most critical thing here, it's not you bringing this person back to Torah, it's the Torah bringing this person back to Torah. The Torah itself does it. We just have to stay out of the way. The Torah is so powerful. We're holding such a powerful kli in our hands when we're teaching Torah to somebody that all we have to do is not get in the way. Just let the Torah to do its job. If we let the Torah get into the person's kishkas, into his bloodstream, the Torah does the job. And when we get in the way, we usually mess things up. That's usually what happens. I'll tell you a story, a couple of stories, my experience in the game, and I think it illustrates the idea. When I was in Chile, I went to Chile to run away from Kiruv. I wanted a break. When we were in South Africa, Bnei and Hara, I was giving 39 classes a week. And, it was like the Rav said, you get depleted. It's Yom B'layla, you're just giving and giving and giving. And I went to Chile to learn. I thought I was going to escape to the farthest place on earth, far away. I could sit and learn, recharge the battery for a little bit before getting back into the game. And it was pretty good because I didn't even speak Spanish, so I had a good excuse why not to be involved in the community. It was I had a good teretz there. And the last year I didn't have such a teretz because I learned the language, so I was kind of stuck. But at least the first 2 years, no one bothered me, except for this fellow came down. He was a Baal Tshuva guy, and he came down, Argentinian guy, and he came with his wife, and I think they had a kid or two at that point. And he was a Baal Tshuva. And we didn't have any Baal Tshuva. I mean, you have to picture this community. There were 5 Shomer Shabbos besides the Kollel, and they were all probably over the age of 50. That's what we had. Right? And so this young guy coming down with his wife and his kids had no social structure, nothing. So he comes and he hangs out in the Kollel. Where is he going to come? So he's in the Kollel, davening with us, learning with us. And then all of a sudden he starts slipping a bit. This guy starts sliding back. He has no social structure. And he didn't have parnasa. He was very worried about his parnasa. And he's looking for work all the time, and he's getting so desperate that he can't find work. He starts looking for work without a kippah. Right? He's still keeping mitzvot, but he's not wearing kippah while he's looking for work. He's afraid they won't hire him. And he's not coming to the kollel much anymore. And his wife was in a state of panic. She's a nice, firm woman. She knocks on our door. She begs me. She says, Rabbi, you got to learn with him. You got to help him. And this guy spoke English, so there's nothing I couldn't get out of it, right? So I started learning with this guy, and I was learning Derech Hashem, which is my favorite sefer that I try to use anyways with people who are, not yet observant or becoming observant. And so I'm learning Derech Hashem with this guy for a whole month, twice a week. Nothing's going on. He's just looking at me like this, and nothing's happening. And after a month and a half, we're learning, and he starts to cry. And tears are pouring down his face. So I go, oh, something happened here. I don't know what happened, but, he's crying and crying and crying. So I let him cry. And when he finished crying, I said, I'm sorry, did I offend you? Did I say anything which upset you? I apologize. He says, no. We were learning about Olam Haba. We were learning about the world to come. And he looks at me and he says, Rabbi, what's going to be with my Olam Haba? And that's why he was crying. And from that moment, he turned things around. He started coming back to the kollel. he started putting on his yarmulke. Today, he's married off all his children. He came back to Eretz Yisrael. His children are all Bnei Torah. So that's a great Maisa, huh? That's the kind of Maisa we like to hear, right? Beautiful. So what's the message of that Maisa? So the message of Maisa, I could say, well, I was Makar of him. I'm so good. Wiener's pretty good. Yeah. That's one shot. It's wrong. It's not the right shot. The second shot, I think, would be, it's partially correct, but I don't think it's the full shot, would be Derech Hashem is amazing, which it is. Derech Hashem is an amazing sefer. I've given it over to groups, non-from people, 12 people sitting there, 12 Bali Tshuva. It's an amazing book, yeah? Unbelievable, okay? Nothing like Derech Hashem. But I think the main thing is, he was learning Torah. As Uri Zohar said. Whether it's Baba Kama, whether it's Derech Hashem, whether it's any aspect of Torah, if you're giving this guy Nitzchias, you're giving him Hashem's Torah, something good's going to come out. And if we get in the way, we ruin everything. We ruin everything. When we get in the way with our bad midos, with our ego, with our what we're trying to sell the guy, so to speak, then it ruins everything. I'll tell you now, not a nice story. Not a nice story to show when we get in the way how we can mess things up. Rabbi Yisrael Karakovsky, the Rosh Yeshiva of Ohr Somayach Monsey, told me this story. Very frightening story. Very scary story to show how we can mess things up. He said a guy came to Yeshiva in Ohr Somayach there. He was doing his thesis on the Frum community. I think he was studying sociology or something of that sort. And his thesis was on the Frum community. And he came to see the Frum community up front. So he comes to Ohr Somayach Monsey for 3 months investigating the Frum community. Just not only Ohr Somayach, the whole Frum community in Monsey. And he starts getting into it. He starts getting into it. He starts putting on tefillin. He starts getting into it. Yiddishkeit's amazing, right? He's getting into the whole thing. After 3-4 months, he comes to Rabbi Rakovsky's office. He says, Rav, I'm leaving. So Rakovsky said, why? Looks like you were getting into it. What happened? He says, all I hear in this place and in this community is schwarzes, schwarzes, schwarzes. That's all I hear all the time. Racists, right? How can I be in a place of racists? What could he say to him? What's he going to say to him? He was speechless, right? And the guy left. The guy left. We can get in the way. We have the greatest show on earth. We have the greatest material behind us that could possibly exist. We have the Torah HaKadosha, which can break down anything. It can break down any wall. We start bringing in our own agendas, we can ruin it. I was at a Shabbos table once, and it was a Baal Tshuva guy was the host, and I was there with, I was a Shiva Bacher already at that point, and I was there with a few secular people, and all of a sudden, I don't know what possessed him, he had to get into this thing, there's something wrong with gays, they're wrong, it's terrible. And I saw one of the girls there was like, she wasn't herself, she was, not gay, but she had friends, I have friends who are gay, they're very nice people, and he just kept going and going and going. She gets up and walks out in the middle of the meal. I was there, I saw it. And I went out, I tried to calm her down and say, he didn't really mean it. She didn't want to hear anything about it. Out she goes. There's nothing else to talk about besides gays. That's what you have to talk about at your Shabbos table. What about God? What about Shabbos? What about Jewish people? What about Jewish identity? There's so many beautiful things. That's what you have to talk about at your Shabbos table. When we get in the way, we ruin everything. We let the Torah do its job, where we step back and we let the Torah influence people and move people, it has an amazing impact. The Torah is the most powerful kli in the world, and that's the second thing I'd like to say. Again, this is just my experiences in the game, having done this for a lot of years. You have to have total, complete confidence in the Torah that you're teaching. Just if you're teaching, but even if you're giving a Dvar Torah, that you're holding the Dvar Hashem, and you're holding something which is nitzchi, which is eternal, which is from Hashem, which is powerful. And if you have that confidence, it's going to come through to the person who's listening to you. And that means, again, I'm not disagreeing with what the Rav said, but you have to know clearly and have evidence clearly that the Torah is divine. If you're going to communicate with people, You have to have it worked out. You have to have it intellectually worked out. Rabbi Gottlieb Shlita has wonderful books on the subject, wonderful shiurim on the subject of evidence for the divinity of Torah. Rabbi Kellerman's book is a little more of a popular type of book, Permission to Receive. And you have the classicals, the Maharal in Tiferes Yisrael brings evidence that the Torah is divine, right? The Ramban, the Kuzari, it's full of it, right? In Alei Shur, in the second volume of Alei Shur, Rav Olber brings, if you don't have a rational basis of your emunah, you have nothing. If you can't explain it, if you can't speak it out, then you really have nothing. So a person has to put in the work. He has to put in the work for himself and also for those he's giving it over to. And inevitably, people may come because they see love and they see a beautiful shtub and everything else. Eventually, they're not going to change their life until they can see that this is a rational thing. Unless they can see some sort of evidence that the Torah is emes. And you have to have that material. I'll tell you an interesting ma'aseh. When I was in South Africa to show that this is the Jewish approach is quite different than a non-Jewish approach. So I was a campus rabbi. One of the hats I had to wear there, I was a campus rabbi at the University of Witwatersrand, at Wits as it's called. So they had this big quad, in the middle of the campus, this huge area, open area with great grass area there. And this Christian missionary shows up, right? Southern Baptist, he got his little soapbox and he's standing on, he was short too, that probably helped him, He was on his little soapbox and he's yelling there with his Bible, follow the Lord. And so everybody finds it kind of amusing. And they throw me in there, Rabbi, debate him. All of a sudden I'm standing face to face with this guy, And so I had to think fast on my feet, what do I do? And there's a big crowd by now, and almost all Jews watching this thing. So I said to the guy, you convince me that your religion's true. If you can convince me your religion's true, I'll follow you. Go ahead. So the guy looks at me like really confused. I threw him off with that one, And I said, I can prove my religion. I don't have to prove my religion to you because we're not proselytizing people, but I can prove it. So can you prove yours? Prove me your religion's right and I'll follow you. So he looks at me and goes, I don't have to prove it. I feel it. That's what the guy says to me. So then I said, well, I guess if I feel indigestion, that means you have indigestion. I said, what does that have to do with anything? So what, you feel it? If you can't explain it to these people here, if you can't explain what your religion's about, what are you doing? And I looked at all the kids, I said, isn't this the most stupidest thing you ever heard in your life? And they said, yeah, and everybody laughed. Right? So that was a pretty good one at that point. But the point is, we have to be able to explain what we stand for. We have to have, because you're going to come across people that are rational, and a lot of them are, and they're thinking, and they may test the waters because they see a beautiful way of life. They see a Shabbos, they see a family, they see all kinds of nice things. They're going to test the waters, but then when push comes to shove, there's going to come a moment, okay, I really have to do this stuff. And at some point, they have to confront the idea, is the Torah really from Hashem? Is it emes or not? We had a scary story in the center program. We had a guy came in, and we always assume, I don't assume that anymore, but we used to assume in the old days that Kiruv was done effectively. Kiruv was done thoroughly. So we always assume when a guy came in, he already went through the basics, hashkafa, ideas, Torah min hashamayim. We assumed that everything was worked out already. So this guy came into the program, and he's learning Gemara, and he's learning all kinds of interesting ideas. He becomes from, black hat, jacket, the whole thing. He's already in the base medrash program. He wakes up one morning, he says, I have no idea why I'm doing this. I have no idea. I can't prove to myself that the Torah is from Hashem. I don't know. And a Rav here sat with him for 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks, and went through all the evidence of Torah min hashamayim with him, and then he was okay. It comes up, and you have to have some sort of a explanation for these things, and it has to be sophisticated. It has to be sophisticated, because people, as the Rav said, people are not stupid. Especially people that are interested in Yiddishkeit are usually thinking people, and you have to have some way of explaining things to them. This one's a little tricky, and the Rav touched on this also, is if you want to get through to people, you have to have yourself an enthusiasm for Torah. And it has to be in your bones. Depth in Torah, and it doesn't only have to be in Gemara. Gemara obviously lends itself to that in a very strong way. But it could be depth in Chumash. It could be depth in Derech Hashem. But if you're going to get through to somebody, generally there has to be a fire in that Torah. A fire in what you're giving over, a fire in your enthusiasm for Torah and for mitzvahs. I'll tell you an interesting story of a guy. Came on a JLE trip here. It was a group of kids. We have these groups a few times a year, JLE. They're generally non-committed people. They come here to experience Yiddishkeit. They come for 2 to 3 weeks. And, often I participate in those classes, talking to teaching Hashkafa, Derech Hashem, things like that to these people. And then Rabbi Mendel, who oversees it, he often whisks off. He gets a couple of smart guys, and he says, learn Gemara with these guys, So he got me these couple of guys to learn Gemara. They were actually from Arizona. And I'm learning Gemara with these guys. And I find that when you learn with completely unaffiliated people, you have to learn in depth with them. You can't cut corners. You can't do these, these rabbinic programs and, they teach you all the punchlines and all this kind of thing. You have to really learn with them. So I was learning the sugya in Kiddushin, Ani Ma'apech B'Charara, which is a quite complicated sugya, and we did the Gemara, we did the Rashi, and then I did the Tosfos with them, and Tosfos has several kashas on Rashi. And I said, okay, guys, how does Rashi answer the kashas? And Tosfos, they were very powerful kashas on Rashi, very strong questions on Rashi. I said, what do you say, guys? And they start going, fighting back and forth. They're really smart guys, too. Going back and forth and back and forth. I gave them half an hour. They couldn't move it. So I said, okay, guys, sit on it tonight. And all night, I was told, they were all night fighting it out. They were trying to figure out how Rashi, I said, Rashi's not stupid. Rashi had a way to learn here. How's Rashi learn? And so the next day we sat down and learned. I said, no. They couldn't make it. They're really smart guys. They were all, one guy was studying astrophysics and the other guy was mathematics. They were really smart guys. And so I told them a whole mahalach, and I worked hard on this, that you could have said here in the Beis Medrash. A whole way to answer Tosfos' kashas on Rashi. Very complex Devar Torah, step by step by step by step. And I saw one guy's eyes just kept getting wider and wider because he'd been working in the sugya himself. And he was smart enough to realize all the steps that were happening. And when I finished, the guy jumps out of his chair and goes, wow! Right? That's what happened. Whoops. That's what happened. Jumps out of his chair and goes, wow. He had a shiksa girlfriend, this guy. Last time I checked, he was sitting and learning for 13 years, this guy. Right? He saw something in Torah. He saw some depth there. He saw something profound, something otherworldly, something deep. And if we're not immersed in our Torah, we can't do that with the guy. And it doesn't matter what you're learning. If you're learning Chumash, you can learn Chumash very, very deeply. You can learn Derech Hashem very deeply. Everything. Rabbi Gottlieb and I fight out in Derech Hashem all the time. We always have machlokes. Right? He learns this way, I learn that way. That's how it is. It's beautiful. So when you're learning, the whole idea is if you're immersed and you're alive in it, that will carry down to the Talmud. If you're not immersed, it's not a good thing. I was at a chasna once, and it's not a nice story, but okay, it is what it is. You learn from the positive, you avoid the negative. I was at a chasna once, and there was a fellow there who was Kiruv rabbi, He was a real Kiruv rabbi. He was smooth, he knew how to say all the right lines. And he starts talking to me, and he goes, the way we do it, like having all these guys learn Gemara, it's such a waste of time. It's not efficient. Like when you're learning, guys only going to be with you a couple of years, and all you're going to learn with him is Gemara. You should be learning Rambam. If you learn Rambam, it's so much quicker. You get to the bottom line, punchline, the Rambam tells you what to do. Gemara is so indirect, and half the time it's hanging up in the air, it's Aramaic, and no punctuation, and why do we do this? And maybe it wasn't very nice. I look at the guy and they go, you really in Kiruv? I said, what are you talking about? That's the most absurd thing I ever heard. I said, is Kiruv and learning Torah just absorbing information? Is that what we're trying to do here? Is just absorb information and give over? I said, that's university. That's not yeshiva. That's not learning. That's not... I said, what we're trying to show the guy is a connection to divinity here. Depth. He's connecting, and the deeper a guy is in there, this is the Mefarshim say, the deeper a guy is in Torah, he's cleaving to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. If you get a guy in deeper and deeper and deeper, then he's right there with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You're turning it into just bottom line, get the results, get the information. I said, it's not learning. So you're missing the whole point. And, as it should be said, he's no longer in Kiruv, Baruch Hashem, because he didn't really get what the whole thing's about. The whole thing's about connection and realizing that we have all the cards. Doesn't mean you look down on the guy, as the Rav said. Realize he's a wonderful human being. Realize he's divine. Realize he has so much potential. But you're holding all the cards. You're holding millions here. When you have the Torah, it's not you. It's not how smart you are and how many fast lines you come up with. The Torah does the job. You just let the Torah do the job, and the Torah takes care of it. There was an interesting story when I was on campus. So I was giving a shiur. This is a small shiur. We got a lot of stuff going there. It was pretty exciting times over there, pretty heady times. But the first year I was there, things were a little slow till we got going. And I had a little shiur, Derech Hashem, a few kids used to come. And it turns out that two of the people there were missionaries, Christian missionaries, coming to the class. And I had a dilemma, what do I do with them? They were actually, obviously, the best guys in the class. They were very interested, They were great. So I had to figure out what to do with these guys. So because it was a private class, it wasn't an official university class, you can't discriminate. But because it was under the Union of Jewish Students, we could allow who's allowed to come and who's not allowed to come. So I had to tell them, listen, fellows, it's under the Union of Jewish Students. We really can't have you in the class. I know what you're about. I knew they were missionaries. And I even offered to learn with them privately. I said, if you want, you can call me. We'll learn privately. But I can't have you in the class. And it turns out they were in there for 2 months. They never missionized. I asked all the kids in the class. No one. They didn't try to missionize anyone. So I said to one of the guys, I said, well, why did you come? You weren't really missionizing. So he said to me with a straight face, he goes, your stuff's much better than our stuff. That's what he said. We're holding everything. We're holding the Welt. And we realize we come into that confidence. It's not because I'm smart or I have good lines or I've learned this program or that program. I'm holding gold. I'm holding gold, and I'm just trying to help this guy access it a little bit. Then it changes the dynamic. But as the Rav said, you really have to see the good in him. You have to see the good in him. You're working, you're trying to scratch under. You'll see some guy walk in with more tattoos than skin and more metal than ears, and and he looks like he's just come from a different planet. Under all that, there's a very holy person there. You're just scratching. You're trying to get under there and find where the gold is. There's a story told of a Rav in Eretz Yisrael, a person that worked in Kiruv, and there was a woman that he was working with, and she was starting to get into Yiddishkeit. She had a problem. She was married to a guy that was sitting in jail for life. He was a murderer. He murdered somebody. He was sitting in jail for life. He had a life sentence. So the Rav decides he's going to go to jail and talk to this murderer and see if he'll give a get. Let his wife's a young woman. Let her go free. Let her have a life. So he goes to the jail. He's looking face to face with a murderer. Not a pleasant thing. And he says, listen, your wife, she's a young woman. Give her a break. She has a chance to rebuild her life. Give her a get. Be a decent guy. I know you've had a hard life. Do something for her. And he looks at the Rav and he says, Rabbi, I have a message for my wife. When I get out of here, I'm going to kill her. And I'm going to cut her into 12 pieces. He was a Baki in Tanakh, this guy. I'm going to cut her in 12 pieces, and I'm going to send a piece to every member of her family. That's what he says. The Rav hears it. He goes, okay, I hear. Difficult, you've had a hard life, I understand, You've had a lot of challenges in your life. But what about this woman? She's your wife. Have Rahmanis on her, have mercy on her. Did you hear me? I'm going to kill her and cut her into 12 pieces and send it to all her family. What Why are you speaking with me? And he keeps going, I understand, Mr. Plony, I understand you have a hard life. And he keeps talking to him like this. And then he looks at the rabbi, he goes, Rabbi, I'm going to kill you too. He goes, I understand. He keeps talking. Anyways, the rabbi kept going back and talking to this guy who looked like a monster and talking to him like a human being. Again and again and again, the guy became a Baal Tshuva. In the jail. Became a Baal Tshuva. The prison authorities and the legal system agreed that he's not going to kill anybody anymore. He's a reformed man. They let him out and went back to his wife. Under all that, he saw in there, there's got to be he's digging. He's trying to figure it out. What's in there? There's something of Kedusha in there. He's digging till he could find where the Kedusha is. Okay, a third observation. We make a mistake. Yeah, we're going to be makar of somebody, like we're doing it, Kiruv, but it's really the Torah doing it, but we're doing it. So we think, you just got to talk Yiddishkeit. The poor guy comes to your house, he comes to your house for a Shabbos meal, and all you want to do is say vorts and sing zmiros, and the poor guy is like he's lost. There's a principle called identification. He has to identify on some level with you. He has to see himself through you. And if he doesn't see any kind of connection, he doesn't see anything in common, he looks at you like a Martian, then why should he want to be like you? He has to see you as an improved version of himself. There has to be some point in common. I can only tell you, when I speak to a secular group, right, one of the first things I say, I introduce myself, Boston, whatever, and I'll say, you know what? I played basketball. I was pretty good. For a small white guy, Jewish guy, I was actually pretty good for that, Could have played in college, and I'll say, I could have played college ball, I didn't for academic reasons, and all of a sudden, wow, now we'll listen. And guys will not even remember a word I say, but that was the rabbi, the basketball player, Because there's something they can hold on to. There's something they can connect to. If they look at you as some kind of Martian from a different planet, then there's no point of identification. There has to be a point of identification. And sometimes that means you have to talk about other subjects, you talk about politics, or I find when I talk to a completely secular group, I throw out names of philosophers, non-Jewish philosophers, and even though, because it's a point of identification. They can say, okay, I can listen to this person, He's somewhat, they think it's sophisticated. We know it's not, but they think it is, right? So, therefore, there has to be some kind of connection. I was told a story about one of our Talmidim, a guy who learned here in Ohr Somayach, and they had a seminar of law students in Monsey. They came to the yeshiva in Monsey to learn about Yiddishkeit. All law students, exclusively law students. And they had the best speakers that you could get in the New York area. Top. I saw the list, like awesome, Dynamic, powerful, great speakers they brought in. And the guys were like, okay, this is okay, whatever. They didn't really get through. And our Talmud came, and he was a lawyer. He was a lawyer, and he was also learning. He was doing both. And he went to prestigious law schools, and he had them right in his hand. Their content was probably 100 times more powerful, but he was one of them. He was one of them. I remember before Rabbi Tatz became Rabbi Tatz, and I was at the university there in the Witz, so we also had a whole program at the med school. We had the regular campus, which we had a lot going on, and then we had the med school, which was really a lot going on there. Who would believe that med students be going to classes? But we had it. The professors were coming. We had a whole thing going there, right? So I didn't even know who Rabbi Tatz was, because he was like, you just come out of Kollel, whatever. I figured, what do I have to lose? He learned in this same med school. Bring him in, And he had them, they were like captivated. They were captivated. It was one of them. It was one of them. And they were captivated. They listened to him. I said, boy, I wish they listened to me like that. But there has to be some point of identification, which means trying to meet them somewhere in their world. Examples they understand. If everything is Torah, you have to bring Torah and not be apologetic about the Torah you're bringing. But you have to meet them somewhere that they can relate to it, they can understand it. So that's another thing that I found in my Kiruv travels. Point number 4, when you're speaking to somebody, you have to tell him what he wants to hear or needs to hear and not what you want to say. which is a very hard thing to do. I know when I first came to South Africa, when I first went down there, I had all these shiurim prepared. And they were very, very, I remember I had a whole shiur on is there bechira, is there free choice or not, based on the Ohr Somayach. I had this whole thing worked out. I remember the first time I said it over to the people there, they looked, where did he come from? What planet is he from? I learned very quickly, you have to speak on their level. You speak on their level, you speak what they want to hear. When I was a campus rabbi, I had a committee of kids, 4 or 5 kids that were somewhat frum. They picked the subject matter for the month. They picked what we're going to cover. It wasn't my canned classes, forget it, that was out the window. They picked the classes that they wanted to hear on, and I had to scramble to prepare them. It was very hard, right? And they weren't easy subjects, test tube babies, evolution, all of every difficult subject that you could possibly think of that. And you had to scramble. You had like a week or two to get it ready and get going. And, but that way they were invested in the process. They would stand in the quad and rope in their friends and bring them to the classes. It's like a political rally. They would get their kids, they would get their friends, rope them in, because you're empowering them and you're giving them what they want to hear. Not what you want to say, but you're giving them over what they want to hear. When I used to prepare those type of classes, I spent more time on how to say it than on what to say. How many jokes to say, where to let the questions in. Because again, it's for them, it's not for me, it's for them. So how to say it, how to speak their language, how to reach them, you're not changing the message, it's the same Torah. But you're trying to communicate it in a way that they can hear it, a way that they can understand it and they can hear it. Right now, in our day and age, we're dealing with a new challenge that we didn't have 10, 15 years ago. We've seen the change here in Ohr Somayach. We talk about it all the time, all the Rabbeim, that because of the internet and because of the phones, the smartphones, the attention span of people has disappeared. Like they can't concentrate, right? I'm amazed you're listening to me still, right? I mean, that's just the Matthias. People can't listen for more than 15 minutes. That's the world we're in. That's the world we're in. The attention span of people is very, very difficult. They have a hard time concentrating. So how do you cope with that? How do you cope with that reality? And one of the ways you have to cope with that is you change your approach. You change your approach. You may have to crack more jokes. You have to tell more stories. You have to move around. I can't because I got a microphone, but I usually move around, right? I remember we had a Shabbaton in the yeshiva 3-4 years ago. We had a Shabbaton, and these are guys already in yeshiva. These are guys who came to learn. In the center program, we had a Shabbaton, and I spoke Friday night, and my wife is with me. I sit down, I'm kind of pleased with myself. I thought I did a good job, good drasha. And she looks over at me and goes, "What happened to you?" He says, yelling at me, "What happened to you?" I go, "Well, what do you mean? What happened there?" He says, "You're walking around, you're cracking jokes, you patted a guy in the back in the middle of your drasha. Well, what is that?" And the fact was, I was completely unaware how much I had changed. It was just part of it, you're just adjusting to the new wave of people. And, she was used to how I would speak 10 years ago, 15 years ago, which wouldn't be that. You stand there, boom, you give over, because people could concentrate. It's a different world today. You have to be more entertaining, more interactive. It's a different kind of world today. And again, if you love that guy, if you care about that guy, you want to reach him in his language and reach him in his way and not in your way. You want to get to him. And it doesn't mean you're being apologetic, doesn't mean you're changing the Torah. Then I asked her afterwards, I asked my wife, I said, "Was the content any worse?" She goes, "No." I said, "Okay, different language." Same idea, different language. And we're in a day and age where the language has to be a little different than it was before. Ad kedei kach, if you really care about that guy, and you really care about what's happening to him, you have to have different tactics for different people. You're working with one guy, you have one kind of, maybe a seichel-dige guy, you're working more with a seichel, one guy more of an emotional guy. I remember in the period when we were down there in South Africa, there was this guy, he was a very simple Jew. Very, very simple guy. And he was he became Baal Tshuva, and then he dropped everything. Well, he was on the way dropping, he was thinking about it, he's I'm going to drop it, Rabbi. I can't do this anymore. And my wife was looking over on the porch. We lived on a street. We lived in an apartment that overlooked the street. Those who are from South Africa, it was a Hunter Street in Yeovil back in the day. And I'm in the middle of the street at this guy, and I'm screaming at him. This is not, I didn't do this as my Kiruv tactics ever. But I was screaming at the guy, you're going to burn in Gehenna. It's going to be terrible for you. You can't do this. I kept screaming at him, and I won. he stayed frum. Got married, had a family, Baruch Hashem. Because I felt that guy, that's the only message, that's the only way it's going to get through. I would never have done that with anybody else. I felt for him, that's what he needed. Simple guy. And I felt he was, that was you're on the goal line. You're on the goal line stand, and you have to hold. And so when you deal with different people, there's different approaches. It's the same Torah. And the Torah is just as divine and just as powerful. The language of how you communicate the Torah may be a little different. One last eitzah, if we're already talking Kiruv. One last eitzah is that you have to be patient. And the Rav spoke about that. Change is slow, and you have to be patient. And you can't just hammer a guy with all kinds of ideas when you first meet him. It's got to go slow. They did a whole series of articles recently, a few years back. Kiruv is dead. Mishpacha, and I don't know how many other magazines, they all came out at the same time. Kiruv's dying, right? So why is Kiruv dying? So the guy writing the article about a raya, about a proof, there's some fellow who was on a Kiruv job at U of Kansas. Okay, now picture U of Kansas. You're not dealing with, Yidden that are too connected over here, right? He was giving a class at U of Kansas on what he prepared. Is the Torah divine or not? It was his opening class. Everybody's on their phones. Guys are walking out in the middle. And you see, nobody's interested anymore. I was like, that's a proof that Kiruv's dead. That's a proof he shouldn't be in Kiruv. What's that have to do with Kiruv? You walk in and that's the first thing. What is it? Kid doesn't even know what Torah is. He doesn't know what Hashem is. Torah is divine. What does the kid care? Maybe talk about what's a Jew. Maybe talk about what God is. Maybe talk about the purpose of life. Maybe talk, is there life after death? Maybe talk about love and marriage, as the Rav said. Why are you talking about, is the Torah divine? Even when I had a group of interested people, and they would start wanting me to give that over already. Rabbi, we want to know, is the Torah divine? No, we're going to get there. We're going to get there. I would wait at least 6 months before I would give a class like that. And we just talk about life. The Jewish view of life, the Jewish view of theology, the Jewish view of God. And then once you've got some credibility, you have some relevance in their eyes, then you can talk about whether the Torah comes from Hashem or not. Patience, slow. We do the same thing in yeshiva. If we have a bacher that has any kind of emotional issue, we don't hit him with it right away. We don't criticize him right away. Right? We have to win his trust. Win his trust, deal with him, show that we love him. Then when we've won him over, then we can say, okay, listen, Rabbi, you have to deal with this. You want to get married someday, But not right away. Patience. And we have to have patience dealing with him. Just a thought, just to wrap things up here. We're talking about why we have this Kiruv conference during this period of time, the 3 weeks. There's another Gemara. We quoted the Gemara in Yuma Daf Tes. There's another Gemara on Pei Vav. Gemara says, Gedoyle tshuva shemivi'ah refuos la'olam. Greatest tshuva, that tshuva brings, how do you call refuah? A curing of the sick to the world. Fascinating Gemara. Tshuva can cure the sick. If people are doing tshuva, takes care of sickness in the world. The Maral, in the Siva Soilim base, the Siva Tshuva, the Maral explains, what's pshat in that Gemara? He says when a person does tshuva, he's going back to his natural self. Tshuva is a really natural man, keeping mitzvahs. That's what's a natural state of a Jew. And if he's doing tshuva, he's going back to his natural state. And the Maral says, what's more natural, being sick or being healthy? Being healthy. Healthy is a natural state of man. Sickness means some sort of defect has come, either a virus or bacteria or something like that has crept into his body. So when we go back to our natural state, then the Rabbeinu Shalom brings the health back to the natural state, which is to be healthy. That's how the Maral says pshat. Then there's a Gemara on Amud Beis. The Gemara says on Amud Beis, Gdolet Tshuva shemekarebes es hageula. Great is tshuva that brings the redemption. The Maharal doesn't say pshat in that Gemara. So I think you could extend the same idea. I think you could extend the Maharal's pshat to the second Gemara also. That what's the natural state of man? Tshuva. That's where we're supposed to be. And what's the natural state of the world? Geula. That's where we're supposed to be also. There shouldn't be violence in the world. We should all be in Eretz Yisrael. We should all be keeping mitzvahs. We should rebuild the Beis HaMikdash. That's the natural state of man. We go back to our natural state. The world goes back to its natural state, which is Geula. And these 3 weeks, we think, we're supposed to be, we're fasting and we're not taking haircuts and we're not listening to music and we're mourning. But at the same time, Ba'avad, the Sfarim HaKadoshim bring, this is a time to be yearning for the Beis HaMikdash, yearning to be reconnected. So what better idea than to talk tshuva? This time of year, to be talking about tshuva and bringing Yidden closer and bringing them back. And Bezrat Hashem in our schus, trying to talk about tshuva and trying to help tshuva take place, we should see the building of the Beis HaMikdash and we should see the Geula Shlema. Amen.